everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. I see some familiar faces. I love that folks are turning their cameras on. What's up, Jordan? I see you. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Nicole. Hey, Melissa. Okay, so I'm excited to roll into this next hour with you. I had a chance to speak with our guest speaker offline. If you all joined a little early, you could hear us as well. Shar, I'm going to present her in just a second, but she's going to drop a lot of knowledge in this next hour, and you all are going to see that the hour is going to fly by super quickly. So with that said, I just want to roll into some housekeeping rules to make sure everyone feels comfortable and confident to really maximize this next hour and participate. I know there's a lot of things going on in the world, so I know you could have been anywhere else right now, but you're taking the time to be with us for this next hour. So let's really maximize this time. We want to use the chat box. I can't stress enough. If you have anything sensitive that you want to be kept anonymous, feel free to find me in the chat box under Mariella, and I'll flag that to our guest speaker. Otherwise, come off of mute, share your voice, share your dream that you had last night. If you want to share, some tips and tricks that you have found beneficial in your own journey, feel free to share that as well. And we really want to hear from you. I can't stress enough. I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid background noise. But again, unmute yourself, come on camera. We believe in visibility. The last thing I'll say is that this is being recorded. So if you do come off camera, you will be featured in our video. You can watch it on Power to Fly a little later. And with that said, I know we live in a world where everyone is multitasking all the time, but I really invite everyone to be present with us for this next hour. So you can ask your questions, you can share your voice, and then you can rewatch this later on Power to Fly, and you can take notes vigorously there. The last thing I'll say is follow us on social so that you can stay in tune with all of the great chat and learns that we have coming up the rest of this month and really the rest of this year. Can't believe 2020 is almost over. And with that said, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker, Shar. Let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to know about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariella. Appreciate the opportunity to share my story today, and hoping to be a resource for anyone who's considering a career break in any form, whether it's a sabbatical, a gap year, or a mid-career, quit your job, start all over type of break. I've kind of done all three. So happy to share any insights and just provide some resources and practical steps, because it's something that I would like us to normalize, as for some people, it seems not like a tangible thing, but it is. And I just want to be proof of that and to be a resource for anyone. So, and thank you all for joining as well, because I know it's midday for some of us and it's the weekend for others. So I appreciate the time. So just to give you a Cliff Notes version of my journey, I was working as a consultant for 10 years for a Big Four company, and primarily working with banks doing like data, tech stuff. And that really wasn't the path that I decided to be on initially. It was just purely by luck of joining the workforce during the financial crisis. And so that was one of the biggest projects. I ended up on it. And that's how I ended up doing that for about 10 years. But throughout those 10 years, I actually took quite a lot of breaks. And that's what I want to talk about today and share some insights into, with some being mini, just 1 month breaks, like, taking an entire month off while I still have my job. And then I had taken a sabbatical for 6 months, and then finally got to the point where I actually quit my job, no ties back to my old company, and decided to take the big leap and to do a career change. So I hope you all are inspired by the story, and please feel free to ask as many questions as you want to, because I had a chance to review some of the questions that were provided in advance, and they are awesome. So I'll try to hopefully get through most of them, because there were some common themes in regards to financing being the biggest one, like how do you finance this? And then also people asking questions about just the logistics of it, right? We want to cover that part too. All right.
Absolutely. And this is a great time to talk about this topic, in my opinion, just because there's so much uncertainty. I mean, there's always uncertainty in the world, and especially now. And so many people have questions about what am I here for? What's my purpose? How can I shine a light on, my mission in life? Do I need to stay? Do I need to go? So I really am excited to jump into this next hour with you all. And with that said, as Shar has said, you have submitted some great questions offline. We're going to take these questions one by one. And just to let you all know that where we are in the world. We're calling from all over the world. I'm just going to give you all a shout out right now so we can see how common this topic is and how much we are interested in hearing from you, Shar. So again, I'm in Argentina. Shar has just moved to Lisbon, but she has surprised her family during these crazy times for her mother's birthday in Michigan. So she's calling from Michigan right now. We've got folks representing from, let's see, Buenos Aires, London, Charlotte, North Carolina, Vancouver, Canada, San Jose, Portugal, Houston, Texas, Maryland, Berkeley, California. We got Detroit, Illinois, we got Portugal, we got Michigan. Awesome. So again, if you're just joining us, go ahead and write in the chat. Let us know where you're calling from. And we're just going to take these questions one by one, starting with this question here. So if you see your question on the screen and you want Shar to dive in deeper, come off mute, write in the chat box. If this is not your question and you want to give a comment or you want her to continue to dive deeper, come off mute, write in the chat box. I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of this chat because I want you all to participate. So Shar, let's start with this one. How did you decide, prioritize, and execute all you wanted to do in your gap year?
Oh man, so that was the number one thing, right? Is why am I taking this gap year? So the biggest reason for me was there's a level of freedom at which I saw my life in the future that I wasn't living right now. And what I meant by freedom, I meant just the ability to exist freely, be creative, be location independent so that I didn't have to be in a physical location because I love traveling and exploring. And I also wanted more peace of mind, like mental peace, to feel good about myself, and to be in a healthier state physically as well. So as I looked at what I was doing and the direction I was going in and what I aspired to be doing, they were not matching up. And because of that, I had to really reevaluate how long I was going to be on this train in this direction that I didn't want to go in. The real turning point for me happened when my dad passed in 2018 because it gave me a sense of urgency, right? Before I was kind of just very, oh, I should take a break or I need to quit, I need to change careers. But then because I was at a good company, I had great benefits, I had amazing pay, it was hard to justify leaving, right? Just to follow my dreams. And so that is why it was important for me to articulate the why for this, And so, like, as I mentioned, health was really top of mind, mental peace, and then just freedom and liberty. Those were the things. So the activities that aligned to that were, for one, getting my health back in check because my health was just spiraling out of control in the sense that between anxiety and between not eating well and working harder than I needed to, I just wasn't working smart. I was kind of putting myself in a position where my health, I was starting to feel the impacts. And mind you, I'm only 35. So, and some of these things, some of the health issues I started having, I was in my 30s, early 30s. So, like I said, the turning point and what made it an urgency for me was my dad passing, and of course, health related. He's young. And I'm like, man, imagine working your whole life and then passing before retirement, before you get to get the fruits of your labor. So, those key things, I would say, prioritize what I wanted to do. And then following my passion became another very key thing. And my passion was around travel. I love being creative. And I love just sharing the goodness in the world because I feel like you can focus on all the bad things, but there's actually a lot of good things as well. And I just wanted to share that through my travels. So those are the key things I wanted to prioritize.
Well, first of all, thank you, Shah, for sharing that part of your journey because that is vulnerable, to talk about your health and to talk about what's going on with your family. And I feel like you are not alone in this situation.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of folks probably need to hear you right now and hear how you were able to come out of those situations. I feel like we get lost in the sauce as far as we finish school and then we're thrown right into the workforce and then we don't know how to put up our boundaries. We don't know how to honor our passion and our intuition. And then it takes something, really catastrophic to happen for us to turn around and say, wait a minute. So if I could just piggyback on this question, if someone is listening right now, let's say that they're in the weeds and they don't really know which way to go, what should they do right now, starting after this call?
So the biggest thing is you need to ground yourself in your truth. And what I mean by that is, for me, I had to start seeing a therapist. And I started off seeing a grievance counselor, and she ended up using her as my just overall therapist. And it's been since 2018. I have the same therapist. Phenomenal. And a Black woman, because again, that was important to me before because the previous therapist experience that I had weren't great. And I realized that I needed someone who I could relate to and could understand my perspective. So that was a big piece, I would say, the therapist, because it was a lot of this process is mental. Most people focus on the financial piece, but I think if you don't have the mental piece and the mindset ready, then no amount of money will solve your problems. There's no amount of money that will bring your health back or bring other people back, you know what I mean, who didn't take care of their health either. So it's like you have to get your mind right. And you will notice how once you start to get your mind right and deal with the things that are causing you to live a lifestyle that you're not happy with. So for me, I had a very serious fear of being broke and not being able to financially take care of myself. And so me keeping my job meant so much to me, because in my mind, if I didn't have this job, then I would be broke, and then I'd be dependent on others, and then start going through all these things that stem from things from my childhood. So I think it's important the therapist helped me unlock those things. And then I also had a personal coach, which was ironically offered through my job. And I signed up for it through my job. And for anyone who's traveling and saying, I don't have time and all these things, these are all virtual. And what I mean by that, for my therapist, I use an app called Doctor on Demand. And that allows me to do virtual therapist appointments, because with my travel schedule, it was impossible to physically go and see a therapist at a certain location all the time. And then for my coaching services, that was through virtual as well, through an app. And of course, the name of the app is escaping me right now, but I'll be sure to maybe put it in the comments of this thread afterwards. So those two things were really helpful, and are things I think you can start doing right now. And if you don't have access to healthcare that allows you to get affordable mental health services, I would encourage you to look online and do research. And there's various groups that have, I guess you can say, resources for how to still get some type of therapist support, because I know not everyone, like I was fortunate to have a job where our insurance covered my therapy sessions. So they were only like $25, I think, that I paid for each hour session or 50-minute session. But that's the first step. And then one more really key step, start to build up a really good support system and community, because your support system will be key to this journey, whether you know it. And not everyone will serve the same purpose of support. Some people will be just general cheerleaders. Some people will be accountability partners. Some people will be the people who are naysayers. And believe it or not, the naysayers will motivate you as well. So I think it's important to build your network and community, and to start getting plugged into communities where your area of interest are, because that helped me a lot through Facebook and other things like that.
Absolutely. I love that you are demystifying therapy.
Yeah.
I have lived outside of the States for several years now, and I live in a country where, I mean, grown ass people can show up late and say, I was at my therapist, and no one will look
No big
twice at
deal.
them. It's no big deal. And in the States, it's like, are you okay? Especially if you're Black, it's like, no, just, you don't need a therapist. Like, work
Pray.
this out.
They don't say, and it's like, you can do both. You can pray and you can see a therapist. I mean, for anyone not to get too religious, but you can do both. There's no reason to think that one has to exist without the other.
Yes, thank you for demystifying that. We all need somebody too, and to hold ourselves accountable. So I appreciate that. Let's move on to the next question here. So how did you know it was the right time? How did your friends and family take the news? And what's something you experienced that you didn't expect? I love that this person put all these questions in one. So go ahead and dive in as deep. Again, if this is your question that you see on the screen,
These are all really great questions. So the right time for me, and I'm not trying to be funny, I think like by noon on my first day, I was like, oh, I need a break. This is too much. And that's because I entered, my background was mathematics for undergrad. And then I did operations research and industrial engineering for grad school, and then went straight into work. I wasn't a technical person though. Those degrees are not technical. So I started on this super technical role, super technical project. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was drowning. So from the very beginning, I felt out, because it was the really huge learning curve. And what's funny is eventually I figured things out. I became, in my opinion, good at what I was doing. But the burnout was just like inevitable, because you're drinking from the fire hose. You're in an industry where you are underrepresented. So that has additional challenges. And so between all of those things, the burnout was what made me feel like it was the right time. So I started off, I kind of eased my way into the career break hierarchy, I guess you can say. So I started off first with taking an entire month off. The entire month off seemed like something crazy, because people in the US, and I'm saying this reflecting back now, they don't promote taking that much time off at once. It's like this crazy thing, like something has to be wrong with you. And I did a trip around the world, and I actually convinced 2 other coworkers to come with me. And I remember how scared I was to ask to take my own PT paid time off, and it's a benefit that I had worked for, and I'd accumulated this time off. So then after I did the 1 month, I'm like, okay, the world didn't come to an end. Everything's fine. Like, you're not that important either. Like, just for the record, like at your job. Prize. And then I did that every year, I think starting from my 3rd year until my like 5th year or something like that, or 6th year. And then I moved on to the sabbatical, which was 6 months. Now that's another benefit provided from my company. And this is very surprising to me. It was partially paid still. So imagine being able to take a sabbatical and still get a paycheck. So I was 40% of my pay for 6 months. I had an opportunity to volunteer for those 6 months with an organization that I really, really believe in. And that was a really good experience. But because I was volunteering, I really didn't invest back into myself and take the break that I thought the sabbatical would offer. So that's what ended up with when it came time for me to take the full, I'm going to quit my job and just start over and look for a new career path. So the timing thing for me was a series of just exhaustion kind of initiated some of them. And then the timing for the full gap year, I say the urgency came from my dad's passing. That kind of let me know like, all right, it's time. Oh, and then financially, sorry, I had to financially prepare as well. So once I had my finances set up, I felt comfortable quitting and taking a big leap. Now, my family and friends. All right, so this one is interesting because how do I say this? There are a lot of people will project their fears onto you, and they are not, it's not ill-intentioned. Especially I find older generations, because in their mind, you know, this idea of taking care of yourself and wellness and taking breaks is actually relatively new. So, and what I mean by that is it's not normalized yet, at least not in the US, and not like my generation, like my mom or my grandma. So this idea of leaving your secure, good paying job, it seems radical. And I really hope that through conversations like this and other discussions, we start to normalize taking breaks. Because if you don't take a break, like it's a quote that says, if you don't take a break, your body will take a break. It'll force you to. And so these are things that my family and friends, I mean, they were supportive, but there was a lot of, well, why don't you? I was trying to like simmer it down into a different version of what I wanted. You know, why do you have to quit? Why don't you just do a leave of absence? Why don't you just take another sabbatical? And I'm like, no, I want to quit because I want to be 100% free. I want to be able to make decisions and not worry about the implications on my job when I go back. So, you know what I mean? There was a lot of people who I think, and they may not have realized it, but if I would have listened to everybody, I would not have done what I did. And I don't think it came from a bad place. I think it's just projecting their fears onto other people. So,
Of course, of course. And I think one thing that's key that you're saying is, historically speaking, this has not been the norm.
yeah.
So of course you're going to have people come back at you like, do you want to rethink this? You know, like, I know you're also afraid of this, so I want to put that mirror in front of you. But you know, the points of resistance are the times when we grow the most. And so I love that you're able to keep trailblazing. We have a great question here from Jordan, and this question is for anyone. I'd love for Shari for you to start this question, and if anyone else wants to pick up their response, it would be great. So Jordan says, how do you imagine taking a sabbatical for a period of time with a significant other or with a child?
Yeah. And so that is one thing that I want to caveat my experience. I am single and I also don't have children, but it's not impossible. And so what I want to say is that you may have to restructure what your sabbatical or gap year looks like. And instead of a full gap year, you may have to do it during the summer when your child is out of school. And then in regards to with a significant other, your sabbatical, because of your significant other has to be in a physical location because of their job, your sabbatical may not be traveling, you know, so there's different ways to explore, or you may have to get comfortable with parts of your sabbatical journey being solo, because that's okay as well. It's okay to do these things, certain parts of it on your own, and it doesn't have to look a certain way, because you actually don't travel when you do a sabbatical. Yeah, you can do various things, and sometimes rest is just a real big part. That was the first maybe 3 or so months of my sabbatical was just this. I was just resting and traveling, but I was resting a lot. I was getting a lot of rest. I was decompressing, honestly. So that's an important aspect. But it is going to be more challenging with children and more challenging with the spouse, because you now have to consider their schedules and any limitations that they have physically. But it's not impossible. And that's why the planning process is so key in making sure that any limitations that you feel like you have, you're addressing them in your plan.
I love that. I have a quick question. For those beginning moments where you were doing nothing, let's say, obviously you're doing other things like resting and the necessary things you wanted to do. How do you not psych yourself out and say, I should be doing something else, or I'm not doing anything, I'm not working hard enough, you know, in those first moments, like, how do you just like, you know, keep on?
It was so weird. I know that sounds crazy, but initially I felt like I had to be doing something. And like it's okay to just rest. And because of course I wanted to work on my blog and I had all these goals of things I wanted to do. But then I realized that prioritizing my health and taking the break that I need for my health to just recover. You know what I mean? Because I mean it was a lot, right? And I was in a high burn and traveling a lot. So I needed the recovery period, and I had to allow myself the grace to just exist, be in the moment, sleep in a couple of times, actually a lot of times. I'm not a morning person, so and I started to normalize it myself, just by the practice of actually doing it and not feeling guilty for it, because I know I had worked and sacrificed for this moment, and this is what I'd asked for and I'd worked for. So like I said, the mental part, you have to mentally know that you deserve that grace and that you deserve that break.
Absolutely. So I'm going to flag just a couple of things folks are writing here in the chat box. So Christy, thank you for writing this in the chat box. I'm also going to invite everyone else, share where you are in your journey, any extra questions that you might, have that might have come to mind in this first part of the chat. I would love to shout you all out. So Christy writes, my partner is encouraging me to take a full break. He is willing, kind of able to support us, and I'm learning to accept that help and dependence, and learning to accept I don't have to do something. I keep relapsing and freelancing and then have to reset and take care of myself. Do you want to comment on that, Shar?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So although I planned for a full gap year, in the back of my mind, I'm like, if a really great opportunity comes, I'm going to take it. And I did. I found a really amazing role working with a travel community because I wanted to get, again, travel's my thing. And it was for females. So I was like, oh, women empowerment. Like it was checking all the boxes. And then I found out that they were building an app. And I'm like, oh, this is hitting everything. Because I'm like into technology and stuff like that. So I'm like, it just organically, I also didn't limit myself from working. And what I mean by that is I knew there were things that I wanted to do. And sometimes the universe's timing is not aligned with yours. And what that means is you can either reject it or just accept it. And so I said, if an opportunity that's amazing comes before my gap year is over, I'm not going to pass it up. And I'm really glad that I didn't, because it's an amazing role. Yeah.
We're waiting on that book to come out too.
Yeah.
No pressure, but a lot of people need your encouragement on this. So I have a question here from Nikki. If you need to return to the workforce, how do you explain the gap year to potential employers?
Yeah, so I think a really big part of this is, again, us normalizing taking breaks. So depending on the reason for why you took your break, it's almost wordsmithing and branding of how do you brand your break. So it's not let's say someone took a month off and all they did was rest. No, you took a wellness break. You know what I mean? If someone took off time to maybe just learn a new language or something, or learn how to swim or whatever, you may say you did a passion project. And it's okay. What you will be very surprised about, which is what I've learned, you only really want to work with people who would appreciate that. So if putting that on your resume and highlighting it would eliminate you from an opportunity, then that's probably not an opportunity for you that you want to align with. So for me, I think transparency, and that's one of the things I've learned during my gap year, is the power of transparency, because you give people another opportunity to connect with you. If I'm going through all these resumes that all look the same and I see someone took a gap year and they went to learn Portuguese, I'm like, oh, I'm moving to Portugal. There's another opportunity for us to connect. So a part of us normalizing it is not to shy away from sharing our story and our truth. And sometimes you may have to do a wellness break because of health reasons. That's okay. I remember when I spent some time working in London, and when I think it was Philando Castile was shot, that one bothered me the most. I think the daughter was in the backseat and saw everything, and that one really bothered me. I took wellness days, and I told people I was taking a wellness day. I didn't make up a lie like I would have done previously and say, oh, I don't feel good. I said, no, I need a mental health day. And then I needed another mental health day the next day. It might've been 3 days total. And so talking about it, putting it on our resume, being in interviews and expressing that you took this break, I think is the best route to take, because how it's received will also let you know if that's a company that you want to work with, but also having the confidence to know and the grace to give yourself to say, like, it's okay to take breaks. It's perfectly fine.
Absolutely. Nikki, do you want to chime in? I see you unmute yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I want to give a little background. So yeah, I did. It was like a wellness break, because it was a wellness break. And then within that period, I had a loss. So again, it kind of so essentially, yes, it was a wellness break. And I guess I'm looking I kind of have to go back to work. So I wanted to, I was just trying to figure out how to explain it. But in that period of time, I went to Trinidad, I went to, I learned, I became a yoga teacher as well. So it's not like I haven't been I haven't been doing anything. I was just resting, but yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And to feel proud and confident about it because it's a growth journey, right? And you can frame it as that as well. Because how we talk about these breaks matters because of the fact that if we like, oh, kind of say it in a way that we feel is not appropriate, then people won't take it as appropriate, right? And we should normalize this because when people do have, especially when you're dealing with a death or a loss of some sort, there are women who deal with like miscarriage and things like that, and then they feel like they have to go back to work or whatever. And it's like, no, or people who deal with infertility challenges and they're dealing with this in silence. Like, no, take your mental health break that you need to process what has happened, to process the loss. You've lost a parent. Take time to process that loss. And then you will find that in processing that loss and doing other things, you start to, like you said, you learn how to do yoga. Like that was on my list, but I never made it past one day. So it's one of those things where it's important, like I said, to share this part of the journey and to put it on your resume. I mean, I would encourage put it on your resume, but that's because in my mind, I would want people to know that was a part of my break. One of the questions that we did have around the break and how to frame it were for people who kind of had a forced break. So right now with COVID, we have people who are losing their jobs, getting furloughed and or getting, fired from their jobs. And so it's like, how do you explain that type of break? And I said, be honest, because the reality is right now with the pandemic, you will find far more people who understand that scenario than who won't. And it'll resonate with people that, because of what's going on globally, there's going to be a lot of losses. I don't think people should feel the need that they have to hide it or kind of sometimes make up something, for that period of time. Because you're allowed a period of time to look for a new job or to take a break in between as well.
Absolutely. And I love that the key thing that I'm taking away, which I love that you're highlighting this, is to normalize wellness and to normalize, breaks and actually like a cyclical rhythm of life. I mean, I feel like we have this unrealistic growth model that everything just continues and goes and goes and goes. And we have unlimited resources and unlimited time and unlimited smiles and unlimited good vibes. It's like, no, there are times when, the cycle, like look at, we have, within a month, we have so many things that happen in a month. The moon goes from a full moon to no moon, and what happens with our bodies. And so to honor that and to be real about that and to bring it into the workplace, I think definitely is going to change the architecture of how we work as well. So kudos to you for standing up in your life and doing that. I have some folks here who are writing me. I love this. I've got a lot of private messages and then some messages here. Just to reiterate. So we've got a question here. How do you list this on a resume when you do need to take a break? In a way, I guess I'm reading there's fear of being rejected by having this, this break on a resume. How would you go about listing that?
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, you can do you can list it as a wellness break, like literally then list out, some of the things that you did, whether it's, rest and recovery. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but it's because we don't normalize it, right? And for mine, like I'll be putting like passion plan. I did a lot of passion projects. And I'll highlight them because those passion projects were really important to me. And they range from, my scrapbooking stuff. I love scrapbooking. It's therapeutic for me, to traveling, exploring, and then building out, my travel blog and building out, my coaching services. So all of these things were projects that I'd always wanted to work on. And I never prioritized because work always ended up taking priority, and then family stuff, personal things. And so it kind of just kept getting pushed down. But when you remove something as big as work, I had a lot more time to devote to these things. And so I'm proud of them because it is important, and we shouldn't devalue things just because it's a passion and we enjoy it doesn't mean it's not worthy to be on a resume, because that's how I devoted my time. And the skills that I am developing in that space are still transferable to some things that I may do in the future as well.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, so we have a question here from Anuradha. Hey, Shar, thanks for sharing your story. I'm on the cusp of a break now. In fact, today's my last day at work. Congratulations.
Oh.
But because continuing the question, but because the world is going through such an upheaval now, I find myself second guessing myself as if I can find a stable job, or maybe I should stay, or I want a job I want once this is over. What did you tell yourself when you had such thoughts during your sabbatical? So if you could put yourself into these times, global pandemic. And then aside from that, even if it weren't a global pandemic, people think twice about making this leap of faith often. So what kind of advice can you give to this caller?
So yeah, this is very relevant to me. So right as the pandemic happened, I would have been about 4 or 5 months into my sabbatical, and I had to make a decision. I was like, is this the universe's way of telling me that I should, not do this? And, I could have like let it just really spiral me into a lot of negative talk. And I also still had the offer from my job. Well, I worked in the US, and then same company I worked in the UK. And on the UK side, I had an amazing boss there, and he kept extending like, hey, whenever you're ready to come back, we're here. And I will be able to get my visa sponsored for London, which I love London. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is tugging at my heart because, I could be in London, I can get my visa covered. And, but I was like, no, you asked for this break, and you don't, although it would have been a great opportunity. And I really enjoyed working with the UK team for my company. I also know that I would be going right back into that situation and lifestyle that I was trying to evolve away from. So it was a risk because, again, I'm not guaranteed to ever make, just to be transparent, like 6 figures again and make a good, a comfortable living. So I'm not guaranteed that, but I'm actually willing to take that risk and bet on myself because I know, like, I'm not going to normalize my gifts. I know what I'm good at. I know what I can do. And I also know that someone out there will pay me for the skills that I have, but also give me the location independence through whether it's freelancing, whether it's, just getting creative and having to be an entrepreneur. There's a ton of options. So I'm betting on myself. I know that's a very generic answer to give, but that's just the reality of how I talk to myself out of the fear and like defaulting back to my safe zone that I'd worked so hard to get out of. So I had sacrificed too much because I had to make some really big lifestyle changes to even be able to afford to take my sabbatical. And I just wasn't going to not honor that because, again, it goes right back to the whole life is short. When am I ever going to do these things if I don't do them now? And COVID really, really, like, I'm like, man, COVID is like changing things so quickly. So I'm like, man, I really need to do the things I want to do because we don't even know what next month brings. It's like open up a Pandora's box every month, So I encourage you to, and have an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset where you feel like other opportunities don't exist. So the mindset part is really huge.
Absolutely. And just to echo what you're saying, I started seeing a mindset coach at the beginning of the pandemic, and I praise her because I don't know. Of course I would be fine, but I'm doing so much better because I'm speaking with someone and having this accountability and being able to work through, all of the things that have been taught to us.
Yes.
I often talk about the A side of history, and you went to Spelman. I went to Spelman for a year. Actually, we'll talk about this offline because we're going to
connect offline. Oh,
right. I'm like, yes. I'm like, look, everyone needs to be required to go to HBCU at least one semester so that you get that African and diaspora in the world class and you learn a little bit about the B history, the B side of history. So anyway, I'm realizing that I'm having to shed all of, and all of these things that are coming up in the news, just like putting it in our face, and how really, in my opinion, just to be candid as well, we are being irresponsible as tech companies by fueling this fire and not really, quelling it. Like, I feel like if more people honored themselves, like you are, wellness, these cyclical rhythms, taking a chance on what they believe in, we would be able to grow more and heal each other more instead of, pretending like we can just look past all this craziness that's happened. But you can hear me preach on another chat. I'm going to let Shar continue to give us her tips and tricks. I have a question here that's a private message. Could you ask? Yes, perfect. I can do that. Can I ask Shar for tips on explaining a sabbatical to an employer when resigning?
Okay. So, and actually, I think this is a good point to explain the differences. So there's a couple of things. You have a gap year, which traditionally that is used to describe like something that college students take as a break before they start their jobs or things like that. It's really popular in Europe. I don't think it's as popular in America, but it's an exploratory period. Then you have what I call a sabbatical. And to me, I define a sabbatical as a career break where and I define this in a guide that I have just so that you can see all the different options and explain them. Sabbatical to me is when you are taking a defined break, but you have an agreement with your employer that you're coming back and your job is supposed to still be there. So that's different from when I say a complete mid-career or just career break where you're quitting and you're not coming back to your employer. So those are like the three ways that I distinguish them. So if you're doing a sabbatical, you actually do need to have an agreement with your employer that you are coming back. But a lot of people aren't even aware of the options. Look at your employee handbook. You'll be surprised at how many of your managers themselves don't even know about the sabbatical option. So maybe they're not the best people to go to, but check out your, what do you see? Check out your benefits. And if you work at a company where they don't offer sabbaticals, because that's also a very realistic, bucket to be in as well, then you have to make that hard decision. Are you going to quit? And none of this comes without sacrifice. There were a lot of lifestyle changes needed depending on which one you're taking.
Absolutely.
Sorry. In regards to how to position, if it is offered at your job, they normally have some type of requirement, a list to let you know how you can be eligible, because they don't just grant it to everyone. And they may force you to do a leave of absence instead, which is different. But the reason that I chose the sabbatical the first time was because I had my continuation of benefits and also the partial pay option. And so I met the qualifications by doing an activity that they qualified as a part of sabbatical. For me, it was volunteering. And they actually denied my sabbatical request at first, which is weird because they're the ones who told me to take it. And then I went through the employee handbook and I'm like, oh no, you denied it on false terms, and went back and forth with HR, and I fought for that sabbatical. And I'm glad I did, because when I got it, so many people around me were like, oh, they never approved those. And I'm like, well, they did. You just got to be persistent. Yeah. But look at your employee handbook, check out your benefits, and make sure you understand the logistics of applying for it. If your company doesn't have it, then you may actually not be taking a sabbatical. You may be quitting your job, just, taking a career break. So there are different buckets and different, requirements for each one. But in regards to how you position it, if it's wellness, be clear about the wellness and how that will make you a personal development opportunity for you to come back as a better worker. If it's for you to learn a new language or to learn yoga, whatever, because at my job, when I looked at the case studies, I'm like, man, some people just took off, for a sabbatical to learn yoga and then learn a new language. I was shocked. But again, we don't talk about it and normalize it enough. So it's this awareness piece. But look at the requirements and then make sure you meet them and position it as such for your job.
So I'd love to hold you there a little bit, because we got a question from Brianna about how did you handle the financial component? Because I know that is something that freaks everyone out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the biggest aspect for me in regards to this last break, the one where I actually quit my job. Again, talking through my coach and with my therapist, I realized the financial insecurity fear that I had rooted in my childhood. And as I started to, it's important to announce your fears, write them down, because there's a quote that says, if you try to hide your fears, they still run the show, but just from behind the scenes, And so there's power in writing down your fears and putting them on paper and making sure that, you are figuring out what can you do to mitigate that fear. So my fear was, I didn't grow up, in a rich family. We didn't grow up, in a household where there was debt and there's, paycheck to paycheck type of situation. And so, and I know what that feels like, not even as a mom, but just as a child, And so for me, I'd worked so hard to gain a level of financial independence that I thought I had. I was like, am I willing to risk all of this just to take this gap year? It's a real question I have to ask myself, because there was no guarantee that I'm going to come out on the end of this with a job. There's no guarantee, but there's also no guarantee that I don't get fired from my job today. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where I was making really big decisions based off of all these fears and putting a lot at risk. And by a lot, I meant following my passion, the liberty to do whatever I wanted to do, and also just being free, in various essences, not just, free physically, but mentally as well. So financially, I had to prepare 3 buckets. I started off with my emergency fund, which I had been saving for a long time for my emergency fund. So that one was kind of already, I guess you could say, set. How much you need for your emergency fund depends on your lifestyle. I would encourage people, most people have never done a real true financial inventory to understand their financial position. And I think that will hold you back from being able to budget. So if you want a starting point, Credit Karma is free. I go on Credit Karma. I can not only see my credit score whenever I need to, but you see all of your liabilities in regards to who you owe money to. And so Credit Karma is nice. And it's free. I mean, I use the free version. I don't know if they have a paid version, but I've been using that for a long time because I can also frequently check my credit score. Once you have an inventory of all the money you owe, you also then need to look at your income. And if you're trying to save for something like a sabbatical, a gap year, career break, you either need to make more money or spend less money. That's just the reality. For me, I wasn't making more money, so I had to start spending less money so I can fund my second bucket. So first bucket was emergency fund, because I want to say, I would just encourage anyone to have an emergency fund set up before you start, thinking. But I mean, if you're super a risk taker, then knock yourself out. I just wanted to advise it. The next bucket was for my gap year fund. And I called it my quit fund at some point. So that one, based on the type of things I wanted to do, I had a certain number. I came up with that number based on the lifestyle that I wanted, knowing that I wanted to travel, and also knowing that I wanted to be comfortable. I didn't want to take a gap year and be forced to be in hostels because I didn't have enough money for a hotel, or an Airbnb. So to save for that, I did a couple of changes to my budget, because again, I wasn't bringing in more money, but I needed to reduce my expenses. So instead of the new luxury car that I wanted, got a used car that was much cheaper. I also moved into a studio. Instead of a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, moved into a studio. And then the other key thing was any extra money I was getting. And when I say extra, I mean, like, let's say if I get any very rarely money back on my taxes, tax refund. If I get a bonus from work, that money was going a really big portion into my quit fund. And I set a goal. And then I had a monthly goal that I was trying to meet each month. And so I had to make other adjustments. So for me, sometimes that normally meant not eating out as much, but also not like I used to travel a lot, like personally, leisurely. So that's where I spent a lot of my money. And I had to, leading up to me quitting, I had to cut back or do much cheaper trips. So those were the ways in which I saved for my gap year. And I had a certain target, and I developed that target based on the things I want to do in my gap year and how much I estimated they would cost. So another tool that's useful, let's say you are interested in visiting a couple of different countries. It's called numbeo.com. It's a cost of living estimator, numbeo.com. That estimator, all estimators are estimates, so take it with a grain of salt. But I found that one to be relatively reliable in regards to the cost of things, just so I can get an idea of like, okay, if I'm going to Portugal had always been on my list because I loved it so much previous visits. It was, how much is it going to cost me, if I'm going to be there for 2 or 3 months, and then the last bucket that I funded was what I at the time called a business fund, because in my mind, I wanted to start my own business company, something of some sort. That fund actually ended up becoming my personal development fund. And at the time, I didn't even think about personal development on this journey. But once I started the journey, personal development and paying, what I mean by that is paying for courses to build a certain skill set so I could follow a certain passion, it just happened organically. So you may not need all those buckets. You may only need one. I mean, I can give numbers, but the reality is it is really up to you, because I needed a year plus. I kind of think I needed another year. You may need 3 months. I wanted to travel and be in expensive cities like London. You may want to stay at home. I wanted to, stay comfortably and live by myself, which meant I had to pay more because I didn't want to do like any house shares or anything during this journey. I'm going to have to pay for that. So you need to decide like, what is your lifestyle, and then the associated costs. And as you start to do your research, you'll kind of like start to change things, because my budget changed so much, like my estimate changed. And I, like, let's say I started off with, I only need $2,000 a month to be comfortable. And then I started doing the math. I'm like, oh man, that's not going to even get me from point A to point B because of, flights. So once you start doing the research, you'll start to get a better idea of how much it will cost. Yeah.
Can I just say that you are fantastic? Like,
yes,
oh my gosh, like, yes, literally. I was like, this is the Lord. Well, this is the
Lord.
Like, yes, girl. Because first of all, you said something about your financial kind of decisions based on your childhood. And I'm reading a book, I'll drop it here, Jen Sincero, You're a Badass Making Money. And she talks about like the 5 kind of beliefs that you grow up and how those stem to how you make decisions.
Okay.
And for, that has definitely been something that I've been trying to work on, as I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I make this change?
Yes.
Now, money don't grow on trees, and that will, cripple the way that you think about how financially feasible this is. But thank you so much for that. And then the different buckets. So that makes a lot of sense. And I don't think I was thinking about having certain buckets. So really appreciate you sharing those tips.
No, thanks for sharing that book. I wrote it down. Check it out. Yeah. And I one about the mindset with money. So you need to be realistic, but do not shortchange yourself. there are ways for you to monetize your gifts. There are people out here doing it. And the more that you surround yourselves with those individuals, and whether it's joining certain communities, even being on a call like this and realizing you start to tap into different communities and be surrounded by people who start to uplift and inspire you. As I started this journey, and I took a course. It's called Blog Like a Boss with Glow Atimo. And her course was life-changing for me because she is the one who, she's younger than me. I mean, she's not, I think she just turned 30. I'm 35. But her course, one, I was surrounded by a community of women who I really felt connected with because we had similar aspirations, of blogging. But two, this abundance mindset that she came with I was like, this is it. And it wasn't just an abundance mindset, but actually putting action behind that abundance mindset, putting yourself out there, being transparent. I used to be deathly afraid of speaking publicly to people. And now I do a live chat series every single week with expats. So it's like, you have to do hard things. Don't be afraid to, and I'm sorry, what's the other thing I want to say? Don't feel like you need to dim your light. I mean, everyone has a gift. I mean, whether you've acknowledged it yet or not, there is something that you do better than most people. Monetize that. People pay for information. People pay for resources. People pay for community. People pay for just, things that make them feel good. Figure out what it is that you can offer and how you can monetize it. And don't forget that everyone has a day one. Everyone has a point where they've never had a client and then they get their first client, but you'll never get there if you always overthink and never start. So I encourage people to do the hard work of starting. Starting will be the hardest part, but the most rewarding when you look back, because your day one, you're like, oh my gosh, And I remember looking at all these other people in the travel community who they've been blogging for years and they're like, at their peak right now, just doing really great things. And it was really inspiring, but it also felt a little defeating because I'm like, oh man, do I really need to go 7 years before I can do these things? And I said, it doesn't matter. I said, your journey may be different. Your journey may be 10 years, your journey could be 5, but start. If you don't start, you'll never know. And you'll always wonder, what if I would have started? So don't overthink, because that's what held me back for so many years. I actually traveled to over 15 years traveling to over 50 countries before I started my travel blog, out of fear of thinking I wasn't good enough and didn't have enough content. And now all my content's outdated and you can't travel. So I share that because it's silly that I sat there and doubted myself. And then I'll come across blogs of someone who's been to 2 countries and they have a full blog and a following of 3,000. And I'm like, you know what, sis? I love the fact that you went for it, and you have to appreciate people like that who really go for it and who don't allow the fear to consume them, because they are the ones who are following their dreams. And it's not about people being more talented. It's not about being the best. And it's not about being the first, but you have to put yourself out there. And I had to get over that hesitation of trying to make things perfect. So progress over perfection, you'll get there.
Absolutely. Thank you all for hopping off of mute and for using the chat box. So I'm going to use this moment because if you all have participated in a chat and learn that I've hosted before, I love to put things into practice starting now. So speaking of collaborating and supporting and opening your networks, feel free to drop in the chat box your preferred way of connecting, whether it's LinkedIn or if it's your email or if it's your website. Nicole might drop a LinkedIn doc right there so everyone can kind of keep it nice and neat. Perfect. Thank you, Nicole, for that. And I really encourage everyone to step outside of their comfort zones, connect with folks who have joined us today, and let's support each other. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I told you all that the time is going to fly by. So feel free to write in this doc your preferred way of connecting, and then maybe try to connect with 2 or 3 folks who have joined this call today. Of course, with Shar. Shar, can we connect with you as well on LinkedIn or wherever you're preferred?
Okay. LinkedIn is Charlene Winter, and I'm trying to find. I have a link tree because that's probably the easiest way to connect. But I can't get out of this chat box.
No worries. We will also send a rewatch email, so we can add that link in the rewatch email so that folks can watch this video again, and then they can access all the links and good resources that you've shared throughout this hour. I do want to flag one private message that I got a while ago, and then we've got about 10 minutes left. So Shar, I would love for you to reflect on this question, and then we'll open it up for anyone else who wants to hop off of mute. So here. During a very stressful family time, I took 1 leave of absence for 1 month and then stayed at work while the family situation was worsening. As a result, my performance declined. I ended up taking medical breaks since my health was impacted. I don't think I can return to the same employer. How do I not burn bridges and restart my career?
Yeah, so there's a thing called like the graceful exit. And I encourage people to consider that regardless of where you're going, how do I say this? Be honest and transparent and say, like, giving these reasons, right? I am deciding to transition to another career. You don't have to dog out your old employer. You don't have to just go, incognito on them. Keep open lines of communication and give fair notice, whether it's 2 weeks required or whether it's, a month. Every place is different. Some don't have anything in order, but at least do 2 weeks. I think it's kind of rude to do any less than that. But and even if you had a bad experience, how do I say this? You're going to go on to greener pastures. So there's no reason to have any negative, or rude, like exit. So I would encourage people to frame it in a way that, you're taking the time you need for yourself to transition into another opportunity that's better aligned to your goals. So it's all about framing about, the positive thing instead of focusing on, oh, I'm leaving here because you guys didn't appreciate me and you caused me stress. It's like how you frame it really matters, and how you transition matters as well, because even if I have no plans of ever going back to my old employer, I don't ever want anyone to be able to say, oh, she left, didn't let us know she was leaving, and, put all this work on other people unexpectedly. People won't be able to say that. So I think it's important for you to be able to just be honest, but fair, and if you have gone through situations where you are dealing with and have to leave because of health, that's a very valid reason to transition from a job. Not every job is going to be for you or good for you. And it is work to find a job where you feel like you'll fit, because I think a lot of us have been bamboozled where we signed up for a role thinking it was going to be one thing. And then we get there, we're like, whoa, this is nothing like what I signed up for. And it's okay to acknowledge that when you're transitioning and saying, I'm seeking opportunities that are better aligned with my career goals, my lifestyle aspirations, however you want to frame it. But just at least communicate to people that you're leaving. I don't think you should abruptly leave. And if the mental health crisis is so severe that you don't even feel like you have the energy to do that, that's when you might need to tap in a friend or something to help you write that email. But I would just encourage you not to leave abruptly without some form of communication to the employer, so that worst case scenario, let's say for whatever reason, your new company wants to reach out to your old employer. You know what I mean? You just don't want any bad blood. So I would encourage people not to burn bridges, regardless of what occurred at the previous company. I know not everyone will agree with that advice, but it's just, for me, it's no need. Like I said, do the graceful exit. It'll serve you far better than anything else.
Absolutely. Leave with grace. I studied theater and film in college, and one of the best tips I got from my professor was, if you fall on stage live, fall gracefully. Yeah. Like you're going to fall, but fall with grace. And I just read, like you were yes. Yes. Okay, so we've got Tatiana wrote in the chat, Shar, is it possible to have a part 2 for you to come back and share more of your journey? I second that. So we'll chat with Nicole here offline and see if we can get Shar back, because we did not get to all of these great questions that you all have submitted. But with that said, we are going to figure out how to get Shar to answer these questions offline. Yes. I want to give a light pause right now to see if anyone wants to hop off of mute. We've got about 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left. So if anyone wants to hop off of mute, now is your time to shine. Let's go.
And I just put in the link tree. I just put my link tree in there, but that should be to my LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Tara, I see you have your mute off. Did you want to say something? No. Okay, sorry to put you on the spot. Anyone else want to share their voice? If not, I can fill up the space. I got a lot of things.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Go for it.
Hey, Shar, I just want to say hello. It's Harriet.
Oh, hi, Harriet. I met Harriet in London.
We met in London and then reconnected back again in Atlanta. So nice to hear your voice. Miss you.
Yes, I know. I miss the entire London crew.
I know. I'll come back soon.
All right. So Shar, let's use these last 5 minutes for you to leave us with some food for thought. Mm-hmm. What can we do starting now? We're ending this chat in 5 minutes. What can we do starting now? How can we be encouraged to listen to our voice, to honor our passion and our wellness? And then I know you dropped your LinkedIn there, or your link tree, but let us know what you're doing, what you're working on right now. I know you're going back to Lisbon soon. Just tell us all about yourself, and then we'll end this chat with some food for thought.
Yeah. So the biggest thing I would encourage people is invest in yourself. Really, and what I mean by that is seriously, and if there's a certain passion that you want to pursue, what do you need to do to get there? Let's say you want to be a yoga teacher, then you probably need to get certified. What does that look like? Start saving the money to do the things that you need to invest in yourself. And what gave me this mindset was I'm thinking like I invest in my 401k through my company when I was working at my company. I'm like, I'm giving total strangers and trusting them with my money, my hard-earned money to invest in other people to build their dreams. I have no idea what they're, I mean, you pick your funds and things, but at the end of the day, I don't really know those companies in depth. So I'm betting on other people more than I'm betting on myself. And when you really think about it from that perspective, you start to realize that that doesn't make any sense. I'm really helping other people build their dream instead of myself. And I'm not saying to take all your retirement money out and put it towards yourself, but you can do a balance and think about the things you can do to invest in yourself, for like courses and skills and your passion. And then the other thing is consider who you're surrounding yourself with. This journey can be very difficult if you are surrounded by only naysayers. I do think naysayers help you and motivate you sometimes, but if that's all you have around you, people projecting their fears onto you, then it will make it a long journey. So consider embedding yourself in communities. You can look on Facebook, you can start there. You can even start here, Power to Fly, amazing community. They have these chats, reach out to people. Do not be afraid to reach out. You will be so surprised how often we have these calls and these chats, and maybe 1 or 2 people will actually follow up. If someone's on a call like this, that means they're pretty open to people reaching out to them. So reach out to people and use them as a resource in those communities as a resource. And then the other thing is to work on the mindset part. I know the financial piece is really big, but if the mindset part isn't in place, those other aspects really don't mean as much because you will encounter challenges. I've encountered challenges. I mean, COVID hit in the middle of my thing, and it still turned out to be something beautiful because that gave me time to be still and focus on my passion projects. And instead of me just getting discouraged and defaulting back to work, I'm like, no, I'm going to just wait this out and I'm going to bet on myself. So I'm working on a couple of things. The biggest one was I'm really passionate about, expats, people living abroad and freeing yourself through travel. So I started my travel blog. I started my expat chats, interviewing Black expats around the world and just sharing their story to encourage other people to consider a lifestyle outside of the US. I also finally started the growth coaching and the lifestyle coaching. So, and what that looks like is helping people just discover and kind of remove some of the blocks. This doesn't have to be a hard journey. It should be exciting. You should want to explore. You should be curious and not allow the fear to control and be in the driver's seat, because it is very rewarding. And I genuinely feel like I've added like years to my life by taking this journey, because the direction I was going in really wasn't a healthy one. So I encourage anyone out there to just tap into, your true talent and your true desires, if you're going to go on this journey, and don't be afraid. Be transparent and share your story. You'll be so surprised how just by sharing your story, it will inspire other people. And that's one of the biggest things is this transparency piece was hard for me because I was a little bit more private. And now I'm like, I want to tell the world. So it's just very rewarding, and it's been very enlightening experience. So I hope anyone out there make this journey your own. You can use other people as an inspiration, but do what speaks to you and what's your part of your truth.
Absolutely. Great words to end this chat on. And we've got folks ringing your praises here in the chat box. Thank you all so much for taking the hour out of your day for joining us. Shar, thank you for dropping so much knowledge. We'll keep in touch with you after this chat. I hope that everyone takes Shar's advice and reaches out to folks who joined this call, and just to put things into practice right now and to believe in yourself and to make your own journey. So thank you, Shar, for your words of advice and wisdom, and enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. I guess it's the weekend. Oh my gosh, it's Friday.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you as well to Nicole. I appreciate you for reaching out, because this was just a really great opportunity. Happy to come back. And Mariella, I told you when I saw your previous chat, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good chat. I love your energy. So can't wait to come as well. And thank you for everyone else. I really appreciate all your questions and your participating in this opportunity too with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend, everyone. Ciao.
All right. Have a great weekend.